The arrival. The dense forest loomed ahead as we drove down the narrow dirt road. My name is Alex, and I had come with a group of friends, Mia, Sam, and Jake, to explore this isolated wilderness. We were thrill seekers, always in search of the next adrenaline rush. The tales of this forest, known for its eerie happenings and supposed history of cannibalism, intrigued us. Setting up camp, the forest seemed to come alive around us. As night fell, the trees cast long shadows, and strange noises filled the air. We sat around the fire, the crackling flames the only source of comfort. Mia shared a local legend about a tribe of cannibals who once lived here. Their spirits were said to haunt the woods. The next morning, Sam was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, and there was no sign of a struggle. Panic set in as we searched the surrounding area. The forest felt different, oppressive, almost sentient. Our calls for Sam were swallowed by the trees, our desperation growing with each unanswered shout. As night descended, we heard a faint voice calling from the woods. It was Sam, or so it seemed. We followed the voice, hearts pounding until we reached a clearing. There, we found a crude, ancient totem made of bones and twigs. The voice stopped abruptly, leaving us in a chilling silence. Desperate for shelter, we stumbled upon an old, decrepit cabin hidden deep within the forest. It felt wrong, but we had no choice. Inside, the walls were adorned with strange symbols, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. We huddled together, the sense of being watched never leaving us. Sleep brought no relief. I dreamed of shadowy figures watching from the trees, their eyes glowing with hunger. Mia woke screaming, her face pale and drenched in sweat. She described the same dream, the figures inching closer, whispering in an unintelligible language. In the morning, we discovered a strange mark on Mia's arm, a symbol we had seen in the cabin. It burned like a brand, and she was feverish and delirious. We knew we needed help, but the forest seemed to stretch endlessly. Our sense of direction was completely lost. We encountered an old man, a hunter who claimed to know the forest well. He warned us to leave immediately, his eyes filled with fear. He spoke of the forest's hunger, how it devoured those who dared enter. His words were cryptic, but the urgency in his voice was clear. Ignoring the hunter's warning, we pressed on, convinced we could find Sam. But the forest turned against us. Paths we had taken before vanished, replaced by dense undergrowth. We stumbled into a pit, cleverly hidden and lined with sharp stakes. Jake was injured, his leg badly cut. Desperate and afraid, we found another clearing with more totems. In the center was a circle of stones, and in the middle, a large, flat rock stained with blood. It was a sacrificial altar. The realization hit us hard. We were being hunted, not by animals, but by something far worse. As night fell, the forest echoed with distant screams. They seemed to come from all directions, bouncing off the trees and filling us with dread. Mia's fever worsened, and Jake's wound festered. The forest felt alive, feeding off our fear and suffering. While gathering firewood, I saw them, shadowy figures watching from the trees. Their eyes glowed with a predatory gleam, their forms barely human. They melted into the shadows as quickly as they appeared, leaving me questioning my sanity. The old hunter found us again. He offered us shelter in his cabin, which was heavily fortified and filled with charms and talismans. He explained the forest's curse, how it was a sacred hunting ground for the spirits of the cannibal tribe, who trapped souls to feed their eternal hunger. The hunter had a plan to help us escape, but it required us to confront the spirits at the altar. He believed a ritual could break the curse, but it was dangerous. We were running out of options. Mia and Jake were getting worse, and time was against us. The night of the ritual, we made our way to the altar. The forest was unnaturally silent, as if holding its breath. The hunter began the incantations, the air thickening with dark energy. The shadows moved closer, their forms becoming more distinct and menacing. The spirits demanded a sacrifice. The hunter, knowing the risk, offered himself. His death was swift, the shadows enveloping him. The forest seemed to shudder, a collective sigh of relief or anticipation, I couldn't tell. With the hunter's sacrifice, the path out of the forest revealed itself. We carried Mia and Jake, who were barely conscious. The shadows receded, but the feeling of being watched never left. We stumbled out of the forest as dawn broke, collapsing on the roadside. We made it to a nearby town, where we were treated for our injuries. Mia and Jake slowly recovered, but the experience left us scarred, both physically and mentally. The locals listened to our story with grim faces, the legend of the forest well known but seldom spoken of. Months passed, and we tried to move on, but the memories haunted us. Nightmares plagued our sleep, and we often felt a presence, as if the forest spirits had followed us. Sam was never found, his fate a dark mystery that gnawed at us. 1 year later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was an old, weathered journal belonging to the hunter. It detailed his encounters with the forest spirits, their rituals, and a chilling revelation: once the forest has claimed you, it never truly lets go. As I read the final entry, a shadow moved in the corner of my room, and a familiar voice whispered my name. The forest. When the letter arrived, it seemed like an opportunity too good to miss. An old friend, Eric, had invited me to join a research team in the heart of the Blackwood Forest. The promise of a well-paid gig studying ancient forest rituals and myths was intriguing. Plus, I hadn't seen Eric in years, so it seemed like a chance to catch up. The drive up was uneventful, but as I neared the forest, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The trees grew denser, their shadows stretching long and dark across the road. When I finally reached the cabin, Eric and the rest of the team were already there, unloading equipment. They greeted me warmly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The cabin was rustic but well-equipped, with enough provisions to last us a month. That night, as we sat around the fireplace, Eric shared stories about the local legends. Tales of spirits and forest guardians were common, but the most chilling was the legend of the forest cannibals, an ancient tribe that had turned to cannibalism during a harsh winter and whose spirits were said to still roam the woods, hungry for flesh. As I lay in bed that night, the wind howled outside, whispering through the cracks in the cabin walls. Sleep came slowly and was filled with restless dreams of shadows and whispers. The next day, we set out to explore the deeper parts of the forest. Eric led the way, with the rest of us following close behind. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the air grew colder the further we went. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed, but whenever I turned around, there was nothing there. Around midday, we came across an ancient stone circle. Eric was ecstatic, claiming it was proof of the rituals we were here to study. As we documented the site, I felt a chill run down my spine. The wind carried faint whispers, too faint to make out the words but enough to send a shiver through me. Back at the cabin, the atmosphere grew tense. Small things began to go wrong, equipment malfunctioned, supplies went missing, and tempers flared. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my window. Peering into the darkness, I saw nothing but shadows. Yet, the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing day. 2 weeks in, one of our team members, Sarah, went missing. We searched the forest for days, calling her name until our voices were hoarse, but there was no trace of her. The local authorities were of little help, dismissing her disappearance as a case of someone lost in the woods. But we knew better. Something had taken her. With Sarah gone, fear settled in. We debated leaving, but Eric was determined to continue. One morning, we found strange markings carved into the trees around the cabin. They resembled ancient symbols, similar to those we had seen in the stone circle. Eric believed they were warnings, but from what, we couldn't be sure. One night, I saw something moving in the woods. It was just a glimpse, a shadow darting between the trees. I woke the others, and we ventured out with flashlights and cameras. The forest was eerily silent, save for the crunch of leaves underfoot. Suddenly, we heard a low growl, followed by a flurry of movement. We caught sight of a figure, gaunt and pale, disappearing into the darkness. Panic set in after the sighting. We fortified the cabin as best we could, but it didn't stop them. One night, they came. We heard the howls first, then the pounding on the walls. They attacked with a ferocity I had never imagined. We fought back, but they were relentless. In the chaos, another team member, David, was dragged into the night, his screams echoing through the forest. With our numbers dwindling, Eric became obsessed with understanding the symbols and their meaning. He believed that performing a ritual might appease the spirits or protect us. Desperation drove us to agree. We gathered in the stone circle under a full moon, chanting words from an ancient text Eric had found. The air grew thick with tension, and shadows danced around us. After the ritual, I began to see things. At first, it was just fleeting images, faces in the trees, figures lurking in the shadows. But soon, the visions grew more vivid. I saw the past, the forest tribe turning to cannibalism, their eyes wild with hunger. I felt their fear, their desperation. And I saw the spirits, vengeful and restless, still roaming the woods. Following a hunch from one of my visions, we discovered a cave hidden deep in the forest. Inside, we found remnants of the tribe, bones, tools, and more carvings. The air was thick with a sense of dread. We knew we had found their resting place, but it offered no solace, only more questions. The spirits grew bolder, appearing more frequently and attacking with greater ferocity. We were trapped, fighting for our lives every night. Eric believed we needed to destroy the cave and the remains to break the curse. Armed with what little we had, we ventured back into the forest, determined to end this nightmare. Inside the cave, we set fire to the remains. As the flames consumed the bones, the ground trembled, and the air filled with an unearthly wail. We fled, the forest seeming to come alive around us. Trees swayed violently, and shadows chased us back to the cabin. For a brief moment, there was silence. The attack stopped, and we dared to hope that we had succeeded. But the forest felt different, as if holding its breath. We remained on edge, waiting for the next move. Our hope was shattered when Sarah returned. Or at least, what was left of her. She appeared at the edge of the clearing, her eyes hollow and her skin pale. She whispered of horrors she had endured, of being hunted and tormented by the spirits. She was a warning, they were not done with us. Eric became increasingly erratic, convinced that a sacrifice was needed to appease the spirits. He believed that only by offering one of us willingly could we end the curse. Desperation and fear turned us against each other, each trying to survive. Tensions reached a breaking point. Eric tried to force the ritual, but we resisted. In the struggle, he was killed, a victim of his madness. With his death, the spirits seemed to grow stronger, their whispers louder and more insistent. Alone and desperate, I delved into Eric's notes. I discovered that the spirits were not just seeking revenge, they were trapped, bound to the forest by an ancient curse. They needed us to break it, but not through sacrifice, through understanding and forgiveness. With this newfound knowledge, I ventured back into the forest one last time. I found the stone circle and performed a ritual of release, speaking words of peace and forgiveness. The forest grew still, the air thick with anticipation. As dawn broke, the forest felt different. The oppressive weight had lifted, and the whispers had ceased. I returned to the cabin, exhausted but hopeful. The spirits were gone, their hunger sated, their souls freed. I was the only one left to tell the tale, a survivor of the horrors of Blackwood Forest. The memory of those dark days would haunt me forever, but the forest was at peace, and so, finally, was I. The woods. I had never believed in the supernatural. Ghost stories and haunted houses were just tall tales to me. That was until I received a strange invitation. An old friend from college, Tom, invited me to a cabin retreat deep in the Whispering Woods, a forest known for its eerie tales and mysterious disappearances. Tom was a seasoned paranormal investigator, and he swore there was something in those woods worth investigating. As I drove deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The further I went, the more I regretted accepting the invitation. The road was narrow and winding, the dense forest blocking out most of the sunlight. By the time I reached the cabin, night had fallen, and an unsettling silence hung in the air. The cabin was old and dilapidated, its wooden walls groaning under the weight of time. Tom greeted me at the door with a wide grin. He was not alone. 3 other investigators, Sarah, Mike, and Lisa, were already there. They were setting up equipment, cameras, motion sensors, and EVP recorders. The air was thick with excitement and a hint of dread. Our first night in the cabin was uneventful, or so I thought. As I lay in bed, I heard whispers coming from the forest. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the voices were too distinct, too human. They seemed to be calling my name, beckoning me into the darkness. I tried to ignore them and eventually fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, Tom was ecstatic. His equipment had picked up strange sounds and ghostly apparitions. He played back a recording of the whispers I had heard, confirming they were real. Determined to find the source, we ventured deeper into the woods. The trees seemed to close in tighter the further we went, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. We stumbled upon a clearing, and in the center stood a large, ancient tree. Its bark was gnarled and twisted, and strange symbols were carved into its trunk. Tom was convinced this was the epicenter of the paranormal activity. As we examined the tree, I felt a chill run down my spine, and the whispers became a chorus, almost a chant. That night, we decided to camp near the tree. Around midnight, the whispers became screams. Shadows danced around our campsite, and the temperature plummeted. Suddenly, we saw them, pale, gaunt figures lurking at the edge of the clearing. They watched us with hollow, hungry eyes. Tom called out to them, but they vanished into the darkness. The next day, we explored the area around the tree. We found remnants of old campsites, abandoned in haste, and what looked like ritualistic artifacts. Sarah uncovered an old journal belonging to a long-lost hiker. The entries were filled with tales of encounters with strange, cannibalistic beings that roamed the forest at night. As we read the journal, a sense of dread settled over us. The last entry was a warning: they are always watching, always waiting. Do not let them take you into the forest at night. The hiker described being stalked by the forest's inhabitants, their whispers growing louder each night until they finally came for him. Our group started to fracture. Mike wanted to leave immediately, but Tom was determined to uncover the truth. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more menacing. Lisa claimed she saw figures moving among the trees, their eyes glowing in the darkness. Sleep was impossible as the whispers turned into blood-curdling screams. In the morning, we discovered Mike was missing. His tent was shredded, and there were signs of a struggle. We followed a trail of blood deeper into the forest, the whispers guiding us. Panic set in as we realized we were being hunted. The forest seemed alive, its branches reaching out to grab us. We found Mike in a small clearing, tied to a tree. He was alive but traumatized, babbling about a ritual and the forest spirits. He claimed they wanted to make us one of them. As we freed him, we heard footsteps approaching. The pale figures emerged from the shadows, chanting in an ancient, guttural language. We fought our way out of the clearing, the figures chasing us through the forest. They were fast, almost inhumanly so. We stumbled and fell, branches clawing at our skin, but we didn't stop. Somehow, we made it back to the cabin, barricading the doors and windows. The whispers surrounded us, a constant reminder of the horrors outside. For days, we were trapped in the cabin. The figures circled it, their whispers relentless. Food and water ran low, and paranoia set in. Tom was obsessed with the tree, convinced it held the key to ending the nightmare. Sarah and Lisa wanted to make a run for it, but the forest seemed impenetrable. Tom uncovered more about the tree's history. It was an ancient, sacred site, used by a long-forgotten tribe for dark rituals. The spirits of the tribe had become the forest's guardians, transformed into the cannibalistic beings we encountered. Their goal was to protect the forest and consume anyone who dared to enter. We devised a plan to destroy the tree, hoping it would break the spirit's hold on the forest. We gathered what little supplies we had left and prepared for one final trek. As we stepped outside, the whispers intensified, the figures watching us with malevolent eyes. Reaching the tree, we set it ablaze. The forest erupted in chaos. The figures attacked, their screams mingling with the crackling of the flames. We fought desperately, using anything we could find as weapons. The fire spread quickly, consuming the ancient tree and the surrounding forest. As the tree burned, the whispers ceased. The figures vanished, leaving us in stunned silence. We made our way back to the cabin, exhausted and wounded. The once menacing forest was now eerily quiet, the oppressive atmosphere lifted. But the damage was done, and we were forever changed. Rescue teams found us the next day, drawn by the smoke from the fire. We were taken to safety, our story met with skepticism. Tom's recordings were lost in the chaos, leaving us with no proof of our ordeal. We returned to our lives, haunted by memories of the Whispering Woods. Years later, I still hear the whispers at night. They call to me, reminding me of the horrors we faced. I avoid forests and stick to the safety of the city, but deep down, I know the spirits of Whispering Woods are still out there, waiting for their next victim. The forest may be gone, but its guardians remain, and their hunger is never sated. The story of the Whispering Woods became a legend, a cautionary tale for those who dared to venture into the unknown. Despite the terror we endured, the truth remains hidden, buried beneath layers of skepticism and disbelief. But I know what we experienced was real, and the whispers will never let me forget.